Hello, my name is Otoma Edje. I'm so excited you're able to join my YouTube channel today. Have a special guest with Kalah Haley today. She is a disciple in the Denver church, and she's also the CEO of Saint Rock Media and the co-founder of Truce Media. I love her passion. I'm actually just getting to know her a little bit right now, but I love her passion and her drive. We're going to cover three things today, or three topics, if you will. The first is, like I said, we'll just get a chance to get to know Kalah and learn about her businesses. We'll also learn some digital basics, kind of focused on YouTube. And then in light of everything that's happening in the world, we'll also learn a little bit about what the Denver church is doing in relation to race matters. So if you like this episode, definitely consider subscribing and sharing it with your friends. Let's go ahead and jump right in. So, Kalah, can you share a little bit about yourself, how you became a disciple?
Yeah, of course. And thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here with you and your viewers. So I grew up in Denver, Colorado. My mom was a single mom in the Sacramento church, and she actually he wasn't my dad at the time, but at the time, my soon-to-be dad was on a business trip from Denver out to California, and he met my mom at church on Sunday, and he was like, "That one." And about a year or so later, we were in Denver, and they were married. And so, so I grew up in the church here in Denver. I have two younger sisters, a 22-year-old sister and a 13-year-old sister. So there's a pretty big age gap. So I grew up in the church, grew up in the teens, loved growing up in the church, and, definitely had some, when you're a kid and you're trying to love God in a world that's not like their priority or like what they're trying to do. Being popular that's not what's going to always happen. And so, I definitely, my faith was challenged. I had different scenarios where I really had to decide and choose. I didn't get the opportunity to even have a passive faith. I definitely had to be active, and I had to make very, strong stances on certain things. I made it through as a teen, and I got baptized when I was 14. So I've been a disciple now for 12 years. Yeah, 12 years. So it's been a pretty incredible journey. I've had ups, I've had downs, and I'm glad to be where I'm at right now, which is in my mom's basement. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I know you're, as I mentioned, CEO of Saint Rock Media, and then also co-founder of Truce Media. Can you tell us a little bit about both of these companies and kind of what inspired them and what each one of them is about?
Yeah, so I studied biology when I was in college. I went to Happy Juneteenth, by the way.
Thank you.
Thanks. I went to Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia. It's historically a Black college, all women's institution. And I studied biology. I actually did not finish my degree. I have like one class left in organic chemistry. And so I came home from school, honestly pretty, discouraged and very disappointed, and had a lot of family conversations that were not fun to have about not finishing school. And I think that, going to a school like Spelman is not cheap. And so there's a lot of student loans associated with that. And so I came home and I was like, well, I've got to either win the lottery or start a business. And so I actually had a real passion, and I saw that there was a huge swelling of the internet in new media happening around me, and right in front of me, honestly. And I loved, and I still do, I really love MMA and, combat sports. And so I actually started a podcast, and I actually got my first investor, small, but I still got my first investor. And I started a podcast called Girl Fight Talk. That allowed me to travel around the country and, do interviews with different personalities, and I built up my channel a little bit, and it was a lot of fun. But at the same time, I learned how hard it is to build an audience.
Mm-hmm.
And two, but I also learned a lot of lessons about marketing and branding that one of my friends, who's actually the producer of my show, he told me, he was like, you should start an agency. And I was like, nah, that's a dumb idea. And then like a couple months later, I was like, I think I should start an agency. And so, that was really the beginning of Saint Rock Media. It was at that time that I actually had been in the ministry for a short stint. And after being in the ministry, that's when I kind of went all in into building up my agency.
Okay. So it's a digital media agency, is that?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. So my philosophy, I have a couple thoughts. One, people follow people and people are people. And what I mean by that is, rather than, why is it that you have brands in the world that are just like, they have like enormous marketing budgets. Think of McDonald's, Coke, Pepsi, whatever brand you want to think of. And yet, why is it that the largest social media platforms or accounts in the world are owned by people, not brands?
Right.
It's because people follow people. People, that's the reason why Instagram posts with someone's face in the image always does better than just like a regular graphic. And so understanding its connection, right? And so understanding how important connection is, that's why my agency is not just let's just run ads, let's just, do your social media. It's all about building relationship and connection with your audience.
Okay. And then Truce?
Yeah. And so what I realized that I'd known this already because my podcast was a video podcast, Girl Fight Talk. Okay. And so I knew, because I'm a millennial, and I essentially understand that a lot of millennials use YouTube. They love to consume their content, not on traditional media. And so if you're going to build connection, video is going to be one of your top mediums to do so. And so with my agency, we always had video elements as a part of our campaigns and our strategy for our clients. And so it's more than a strategic partnership with Truce. Truce does a lot of, primarily most of all of Saint Rock Media's production, but I'm also a co-founder in Truce Media as well. And we started that about a year ago, and we actually have a studio in downtown Denver, outfitted for any type of production.
Okay. What are some of the milestones that have occurred recently in your businesses?
Yeah, it's interesting is with COVID, this has been a strange, very bizarre year. And, we with the Truce side of, at Truce, all of our partners, we had a lot of plans, and we were very excited about the direction that we could go in 2020. None of that has happened. We, just like everyone else in March, we essentially learned that we had to close up our business and, or at least our physical location. And so we had to pivot pretty quickly. We had to think through what happened. So there was a couple things that happened in rapid succession. This was 2 weeks before Easter, and COVID had already hit. Churches were no longer meeting in person, and we were seeing I was seeing a lot of live streams, and I was just like, whoa, this is rough. This is amen, but goodness, we need some help. And so, knowing that we weren't going to be meeting in person for Easter, I just felt like strongly compelled. I was like, you've got to help in whatever way you can. And so the Spirit spoke so clearly to me. I woke up one Saturday, this is like 2 or 3 Saturdays before Easter. And I was like, I need to do some kind of like conference or workshop for our churches. And I just, I knew the pathway that it was going to take to get there. So to start, I knew, okay, let me go ahead and get we need some branding, we need some graphics and things like that. And so put that together. I called a couple speakers who I knew would say yes. And so I said, hey, can you speak at this conference? And they said yes, which then the ball just kind of got rolling, and more and more people just said yes. I reached out to Disciples Today, Roger and Lyanne oh, this is terrible. Justin, there you go. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's so terrible. I'm like talk to Justin all the time. But yeah, so
I didn't tell you I was in South Africa.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, Justin used to disciple me.
Oh, wow. There you go.
Actually, my wife is a Kosa from South Africa too.
Oh, same. Wow. Yeah. So our family is from Joburg as well.
Oh,
on my mom's side. Yeah. My grandparents live in Randfontein. But yeah, so I reached out to Disciples Today and it's like, hey, I know this is very short notice, but I really believe we need to do this and I need your support. I need you guys to let people know and get the word out about this. Mm-hmm. And they said yes. And so literally in less than 10 days from the day that I woke up feeling like I needed to do it to the actual event, I was hoping maybe we could have maybe 500 people. I felt like that was really faithful. Mm-hmm. And then we ended up having over 1,300 people show up to that conference.
It's a bunch of countries too, right? It's all over
70 something, 78 countries or something like that. And so that just when God answers prayers and you're just almost overwhelmed and exhausted by it. I just was I'm tired. This is incredible, but I have no idea what to think about all this. And so, so we just worked every day. We just did what we needed to do to get to that day's work done. Mm-hmm. And by God's grace, we had an incredible event. And that just kind of spurred into the next thing. And because of that, we realized hey, with COVID, people aren't going to be able to have in-person events anymore. Mm-hmm. And so on the Truce Media side of things, we realized, okay, what are some other industries that could use our expertise to help support them for events that they need to have? And so one of our partners, someone reached out to him and was like, hey, can you do a virtual graduation ceremony? And so we realized it kind of clicked. We're like, schools have budgets. They have to do graduation. They probably weren't planning for a virtual one, but it's probably, in a lot of ways, the best thing that they can do. And so in about 8 weeks, we scaled from our 5-person co-founding team to 75 people. Now, granted, these aren't all these are not full-time employees or they're, sure, all contractors, but our operation just completely skyrocketed. And so, yeah, we've now done over 100 graduation ceremonies and worked with schools all throughout the US and in Canada. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, those are just a couple of the things that have happened in the last couple of months. I feel like we're just recovering right now. It's just been go every single day. We're super, obviously there are a lot of businesses that have suffered. People have lost their jobs and businesses have gone out of business and all types of things. And so we feel very grateful, overwhelmed with gratitude that we were able to figure out how to pivot successfully during this time.
Yeah, just a spark, you were in the right place at the right time and God was speaking and it led to a lot of other things. So that's awesome. Okay, so just moving on to digital platform basics. So what would you say are some of the basic elements that people or churches need to consider to grow their YouTube channel? I know there's many platforms. I guess we'll just speak about YouTube. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so in the midst of all of this, one of the things that I launched recently, and tomorrow we actually have our kickoff, is a cohort of a handful of churches that are serious about and understand that online is the greatest mission field that we haven't touched.
Yeah.
And so these churches have decided to work with my team for the next year to help them understand, be educated, and become experts, hopefully in the next year, on how to manage their online brand as a church. With regards to YouTube's probably the most powerful platform on the internet today. Yeah, I would say that. I feel very comfortable saying that from a social media standpoint. In terms of how to help a church or any channel, it doesn't really matter if it's a church or not. A couple of things. You have to reverse engineer what these platforms want, right? Like the way that anything you want to be successful at, you just need to reverse engineer what the other party's motivation is. And so you have to ask yourself the question, what is YouTube's motivation? Well, YouTube wants their participants to be on their platform all day long,
Right.
so that they can present as many ads to those people as possible, without burning them out. And so, okay, well, how does YouTube ensure that they get people to stay on their platform? Well, they rely very heavily on content creators to create amazing content so that people stay on their platform. And so when it comes to, how YouTube will reward your channel, essentially, with more discovery, and hopefully which will convert into subscribers and people who are loyal to your channel, you need three things. One, you need consistency. And so if you're going to start a YouTube channel, and this actually applies to any social media channel or account, you have to be consistent. On YouTube, you should be posting, same time, same day, every week. The next thing that you want to think about is volume. So we already know that, YouTube wants to know, like, consistently, are you reliable? Are you going to be posting consistently? Two, can you do that? Can you post consistently and post multiple times a week? Because the more content that you put out there, the more people will come back to the YouTube platform. And then the third thing is quality. And I think people misunderstand what quality means. Quality is an indicator. You can indicate quality based off of how much people engage with your content. So it's not always, do you have the best cameras? Do you have the best audio? All of those things. Those things help your end user have a great experience consuming your content. But at the end of the day, if you have all of those things and yet the actual content itself isn't great, like the substance of the content, people won't stay around. If they don't really enjoy or connect with your personality, they won't stay around. And so YouTube can tell if someone's really enjoying your content based off of how well they, do they like your video? Did they subscribe to your video? Did they share the link with one of their friends? Did they write a comment? And these are all just indicators of the quality of your content. And so if you're wanting to grow your YouTube channel, you've got to be consistent. You've got to have a good number of, you have to have a pretty good volume. I mean, I would recommend at least publishing a video twice a week. If you can get to 3, that's that much better. And then lastly, making sure that you're creating content that people engage with.
Okay. What are some of the tools that you would recommend that people use to enhance their platform?
Tools? What do you mean?
I think you had mentioned at one point Canva. This would be like more for the social media strategy, workflow, scheduling, program management. Gotcha.
Yeah, so if you're a team, again, like I'm teaching a lot of these churches right now. There's really 2 phases. There's, what we're talking about right now is phase 1, which is build the machine, and then phase 2, which is feed the machine. And so, I say this at running the risk of getting people to get too theoretical about creating content, because sometimes you can just sit there and think about it instead of just doing it. So I don't say all of this I want you to go towards action. But if you do have a team, and if you're not just by yourself, it is helpful to be organized so that you're not just wasting each other's time. So one platform that I really love just to kind of keep everyone organized, and it's free, is called Asana. And it just it allows you to do some project management, some really basic, okay, what tasks need to be done, who's responsible for doing them, and when is it due, right? And so, and it sends like automatic reminders to your email to say, hey, this task is due tomorrow. So that's really helpful. Some other tools, Adobe Suite, obviously for creating, graphics, Adobe Premiere for video editing, Adobe Spark, if you're not like a real like graphic designer, it's like a really basic tool, kind of like a Canva. So yeah, the Adobe Suite's really good. Photoshop, Illustrator, Lightroom, all of those tools. I think something else that we've really enjoyed using on our team recently is frame.io. It's a great video production workflow tool so that, usually if you're making content, you have someone that you have to show it to before you can publish it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you, Frame.io integrates into, Final Cut Pro and Premiere and DaVinci Resolve. So if you're making video content, you can actually upload it, or like I said, that integration is there through Frame.io. And then you can submit that video through Frame.io to whoever is responsible for reviewing it. And they can actually make comments and say, hey, the audio is really low over here, or hey, add a graphic over here. And it's got time stamps. So that you know exactly where you need to make those edits.
So it allows for collaboration in a great way.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So yeah, those are a couple of the tools. I mean, we love Slack. Slack is like, it's like remote control of all of these tools. So like even with Frame.io, it has a Slack integration. So you can know when someone adds a comment and you get a Slack notification. So yeah, Slack, Zoom, our teams are mainly remote. So we use a lot of Zoom. We use a lot of Google Hangouts or Google Meets, whatever they call it these days. So it's pretty simple. I mean, our workflow is pretty simple, but yeah, we have some good tools.
Okay. Going to change topics a little bit. So I know obviously with the passing of George Floyd, a lot of us are, in fact, the whole world is kind of doing some soul searching, which I think is very good.
Yeah. I
did want to ask for the church in Denver. I know you had, I think recently an Untold Stories night. I just wanted to find out, I guess if you can maybe explain what Untold Stories night is, how it went, and maybe some other things you guys are working on in your.
Yeah, so back in 2016, when there were a number of shootings in the United States, I think it was a year we had Reach in St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
There just was a lot of hurt and, just a lot of hurt and pain in the Black community in general. But then and I think sometimes in our church, we can be a bit naive to believe that those things that happen in the world don't also impact us inside the church. And I think that us not realizing that has really hurt and really honestly damaged a lot of relationships. By God's grace, I think that a lot of those things those relationships are being redeemed right now, but it's been, a lot of years since then. With what's going on right now, there's a lot of great conversations that we're having. But back in 2016, the Denver church, we learned that there was an ICOC diversity team.
Mm-hmm.
And our elder, well, I don't know at the time if he was on it, but shortly after, Chris Jacobs became a part. Chris Jacobs and I think also Wade Cook, who was one of our evangelists here in Denver, were a part of that team. We had the Kirkpatricks, Scott and Theresa from Columbia, South Carolina, came out to speak with the Denver church, I think 2 years in a row. And then the year after that, we had Michael and Micretia Burns come out. And so that first year that the Kirkpatricks were here, we established Denver's diversity team.
That was 2016 or?
I think it was either late 2016 or early 2017.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, like, for example, my parents were on it. A number of other Black couples, a couple of other Black singles were on it. And in a lot of ways, it was, for the first year, it was just like a year of healing, honestly. Just being able to have a platform to talk about these things in the church where it's not taboo.
You guys just had like smaller meetings or bigger meetings, or how was the healing?
Yeah, so we would have our diversity team meetings like once a month. And so we would put together different programs for the church, church-sponsored programs. So we actually had our first Untold Stories event that we hosted. I think it was 2017 during Black History Month, I believe, and or something. It was, I don't know. I have to look back at the timeline, but
just real quick, how was that for everyone? I know that was like the initial one. I know you've had one, I guess, more recently, but how was the first one in terms of like how the Blacks in our churches communicated and the whites responded and understood things?
Yeah, it's definitely been an evolution of understanding and response, because I think that a lot of people in the church, their perspective has been, well, we're all one in Christ. So why is this for the Black, why are we segregating ourselves? And there's a lot of just kind of these misunderstandings. And I think in a lot of ways you have to ask yourself, do you want to understand? It's almost one of those, do you want to get well? Because I can explain it to you, but if you never had the intention to understand in the first place, then it's just hot air. Mm-hmm. So, we've gone through our growing pains, even just to be able to have the conversation and to be able to model what a healthy conversation looks like. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, the first couple of events, they were smaller. In a lot of ways, it was just, the first one was actually just for the Black members of our church. And that was like very like controversial, because people were like, why is it just for the Black people? What's going on over there? Like, oh, wow. Yeah. It's like, we're just trying to help each other heal, because there's so much pain and anger that people needed a place to be able to speak about it in a way that they didn't have to filter it, so that they could actually share what was in their heart and do it in a safe environment. And also not do it in a way that they had to then censor, so to speak, what they were feeling to make other white brothers and sisters feel comfortable, which isn't helpful when you're trying to let what's in your heart out. And so, yeah, so that was our first one. It was actually really amazing. I think that it was really, I think a lot of the Black brothers and sisters in the church felt really, it was just healing and very redeeming to even know that like the church supported that kind of conversation, and to create that space just for the Black brothers and sisters in the church. So that was really positive. And then as the years went on, we had more of these untold stories and invited, I think we had one with the staff specifically, the Denver church staff. And that was great too. Like there's a lot of relationships. And I think with a lot of these conversations with Black folks, it's really difficult to have these conversations at church, because I think there's the genuine curiosity of like, do people really want to know? Do people really care? Because it's almost more hurtful. It's already terribly hurtful for things, when there's these shootings that happen and nothing gets talked about or nothing gets mentioned. That's like incredibly painful. But then it's almost in some ways more painful when we're talking about being one in Christ, but then it almost seems like the scripture talks about when one part of the body hurts, everyone hurts. It almost seemed like that didn't apply. Right. And so to then take the risk of, hey, you're a white brother or white sister, and I have a good relationship with you, but there's something that's very deeply painful going on in my life. And I would like to share about what's going on with you, but your response could really impact what our relationship looks like going forward. Mm-hmm. And I think it just feels very risky I want to be unified. But it's almost like unity only comes on your terms. Mm-hmm. Or unity only can be had as long as you feel good about it, or as long as it's comfortable for you. Mm-hmm. And I think that, as a lot of these painful and really hard conversations were had as time went on, in a lot of ways, I think that the work that we had done years previously really set us up for where we are right now. Mm. And, with the killing, with the murder of George Floyd, I think, our church has seen, it's night and day, the response, and I think that there are a couple of things, like just myself, as I processed it, I was like, well, what's different about this situation compared to all the others? Like, did you need perfect production for, like, I think that part was hurtful. I didn't want to focus on the negative parts, but I think it did speak loudly as well to say, like, hey, like, this has been going on. I don't understand what is different about this situation compared to all the others. And so I had a conversation, actually. I had a sister reach out to me, and really great sister. She was just like, I'll be honest, I was afraid to speak out on these things because I didn't want to ruffle feathers of my friends in my community. And I said, you essentially, and I wasn't upset with her, but I did tell her, you're essentially, you've shown favoritism of, your white friends and the people that you feel closest to in the church. You put their comfort above the pain of other people. And it wasn't like out of anger. It wasn't out of frustration. It was just more of a stating it is what it is. Like, and she, it wasn't to make her feel guilty or any of those things. And she actually, it was a really great conversation, because she basically was just like, I'm sorry, like, I know exactly, it was essentially a sin of omission. And I don't think we talk about that too much, but like, knowing the good you ought to do and not doing it. Yeah. And she just, apologized. And I was like, I'm so grateful that you're seeing this and like confronting it, and thank you. Like, I was grateful to her. I was like, I thank you for like, for acknowledging, this. And so I think like where we're at, God has been very gracious, and we're definitely in the right trajectory. So yeah.
That's awesome. All right. So just closing up. So to me, you seem like someone who's very passionate. Definitely, you got a lot of fire, a lot of vision, a lot of focus for the things that you want to go after. Where do you think this comes from?
Oh gosh, where do I think it comes from? Honestly, it might sound really cheesy or I don't know, weird, but I do genuinely love God. And I have no idea like where God wants me to go in my life, but I genuinely feel this like burning desire to want to be ready and prepared for wherever he wants me to go. And to be in a position, I feel like I've missed opportunities. I know that I've missed opportunities I know God wanted me to do in the past because of my own sin and because of my own inability. I wasn't prepared. I just simply wasn't prepared for it. And it was like deeply painful, like things that I knew God wanted me to do. And so prayerfully now, as I've matured and grown and repented in a lot of areas, it's not on, it's not on me for not, for missing out on opportunities that God has set aside for me. So, yeah.
How would you say you plan your weeks, months, years, just generally speaking?
I have no idea. I honestly, I mean, I use my calendar. I know what's coming up. And I do think about, I try to be thoughtful about like what God could be wanting me to do. I do try to listen. And so, but I do have strategies in mind in terms of like, okay, it would be really cool to see this happen. But it's dependent upon a lot of other things. And so I do have a lot of dreams and prayers and goals. But a lot of it has to do with like God opening doors or closing doors. So I dream, I have hope, I have like big dreams. I really do. And a lot of it is just waiting to see like how God maneuvers and kind of opens and closes doors.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say are some of your heroes and some of your perhaps favorite books?
Heroes. That's a good question. I actually really like, you want like just generally or like spiritual or any of that?
Generally.
I do really like Elon Musk, actually. I think he's like pretty cool. He just he is who he is unapologetically, and he just, whatever he does with his best, and he's not afraid of like, failing or missing a deadline. And it's like, okay, cool. He missed a deadline, but he just like launched launched a rocket into space. Like, who else can say that? Like, that's pretty cool. I really love Peter, because that's actually how I named my company, Saint Rock Media. I just love the spirit of Peter. I'm very entrepreneurial at heart. I'm not afraid of making mistakes. I don't prefer that people make mistakes, but I'd rather prefer make a mistake than like not try something at all. So yeah, I love Peter. I love that he was willing to even do things wrong passionately, get corrected, and then keep going. So that's kind of the spirit of, that's kind of like who I am in a lot of ways. I love my grandparents in South Africa. They really, they are rebels in their own rights. They, my grandfather grew up in apartheid South Africa. He was actually born in District 6 in Cape Town. And so he was threatened to be kicked out of the country if he didn't stop his, he essentially was a part of a group called Reba Africa that would stand up against the apartheid government. And so he actually had to move to Kenya. The President Kenyatta offered him citizenship because of his activism in South Africa, where he met my grandmother and they got married. My grandmother's actually American. So yeah, no, I feel like that's one of the things I'd love to do in my life too, is move to South Africa at some point, really build, community and also help from a business and infrastructure standpoint in South Africa. So, but yeah, no, I love my family. I think that I'm inspired by them most and foremost, because I get to see their lives and see how they work out. It's great seeing them. I live at home with my parents, so I still get to see all their little like fights that they have and stuff like that. So I get to see how they like work all that stuff out and how they really fight. They really fight, for each other and for God and for our family. So yeah, I would have to say that they're the people I look up to the most.
It's a small world. Wow. We'll definitely have to have you meet my wife with the South African connection. That
awesome. Would be great. That would be great.
Well, thanks so much for your time. I do hope that everyone was able to get some awesome stuff out of our time together. You definitely are an inspiration as a Kingdom kid. I know you got great things coming in the future, and we wish you definitely all the best.
Thank you so much, Otoma. Thanks for having me.
Okay, thanks again. See you guys.
Subscribe, you guys. Subscribe.
Yeah.
Cool.